what I meant to say about in the early 1980s, what I meant to say is that an end to the occupation seemed more realistic than it does now. And a two-state solution felt more realistic in the early 1980s than it does now. So I guess there's two ways of analyzing the current conjuncture in terms of hopefulness and hopelessness. On one hand, just watching what's happening in Gaza and thinking about the potential future of Gaza makes you feel incredibly hopeless. It's almost impossible to see any way out for the people of Gaza that has any hope in it. I feel like the potential for a two-state solution is much grimmer now than it was in the early 1980s. But a two-state solution isn't the only possible solution. And I'm just remembering a conference I went to maybe 15 years ago on BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And a lot of the speakers at the conference were saying it's time to give up on the two-state solution and go back to the one-state solution. And this is why we support a one-state solution. And the people who were speaking were mostly older generation. And then a young woman in the audience, a graduate student, stood up and said, you know, I'm writing my dissertation on the possibility of a no-state solution. Can't we talk about the no-state solution? And it just felt like such a breath of fresh air. Like, you know, we're sort of locked in this debate, one state, two states, one state, two states. And, you know, I think, you know, one of the things that the post-colonial era has taught us is that having a state doesn't solve all your problems, and that in a system of global apartheid and global economic inequality, and a world financial economic system dominated by a few major powers, it's going to take more than having a state. And I should also say that this isn't really something new. And I recommend this book to everybody because I love it so much. But Adam Getachews' book, World Making After Empire, that looks at how anti-colonial leaders in the first and the second half of the 20th century, national sovereignty was only a very small piece of how they wanted to remake the world. So, you know, this concept of world making. And it had a lot more to do with restructuring the way the politics and economics of the planet was organized rather than just creating another state. But that the colonial powers were not about to let that happen. And so she looks at how their projects and goals and dreams were cut back and back and back and back until what they were left with was national sovereignty. And then, you know, we kind of anachronistically look back and say, oh, well, that's what they always wanted was national sovereignty. Well, they did, but that was only a small piece of what they wanted, but that was what they got out of all the things they wanted. You know, we live in a world of nation states, so it's really hard to imagine solutions that aren't based on just creating another nation state. But, you know, if you look around the world, a lot of post-colonial nation states are rife with, like, having a nation state didn't solve the problems, especially the problems for the poor in those new nation states. So, you know, several Latin American countries have moved towards the concept of plurinationalism and written it into their constitutions, and that, you know, Latin American countries were some of the first colonized countries to become independent and to form nation states, mostly in the early 19th century, shortly after the United States. And most of those new nation states, like many new nation states around the world, were also, in a way, ethno-states, ethno-nationalist states, where the Creole, or mostly Mestizo and Spanish-descended minorities, ruled over large indigenous populations who were still marginalized and excluded and exploited by the new nation states. And, you know, over the course of 2 centuries, this dynamic and dichotomy has really been maintained in Latin America. And not until the end of the 20th century have indigenous movements making claims to their political rights pushed forward this idea of plurinationalism, and that the state can't be just the state of the Creole elites, that indigenous peoples have to be recognized with peoples, and the states have to be plurinational. You know, I guess in terms of hope, I would hope that something better than a two-state solution could be in the future of Palestine. And some, long ago, people talked about the concept of a binational state. And in some ways, I feel like Latin America's push towards this idea of plurinationalism has opened the door to think about ways that a state can be other than just a nation state. And I think a lot of Palestinian activists now talk about, there are multiple different groups of Palestinians. There's Palestinians inside the 1948 borders. There's Palestinians in the occupied territories, the West Bank and Gaza. There's Palestinians in East Jerusalem, and there's Palestinians in the diaspora, those who were mostly expelled in 1948, some expelled in 1967, who can't go back. And that all of those Palestinians have rights. And all those Palestinians have rights in Palestine. So any hopeful solution has to take into account the rights of all of those people. And I'm just thinking about a comparison because I just came back from Colombia, South America, where I've been working for several decades with communities that are displaced, have been displaced by a multinational mine, a coal mine, in a very remote region in northern Colombia, mostly Afro-descended and indigenous communities. And there's one community in particular that was violently displaced in 2001. And despite numerous promises by the company and internationally sponsored agreements to reconstruct that community, like it can't be reconstructed where it was before because now it's a mine, but to resettle the community in comparable lands and to sort of like to recreate the social fabric of the community, it hasn't happened. And, I was thinking a lot about, and the community now is very divided because the mine has offered different perks to different people. Some people, this was 20 years ago that it happened. So some people are still just basically displaced. They're homeless. They have no place to be. Some people have gotten packages from the company and moved to a city and found some other way to live. And, the community, for them, that community doesn't exist anymore. They have a new life. And the community is divided in terms of what exactly they want. And what we were arguing with the company is that you're the one who displaced these people. All of them have rights that you have to acknowledge, even if they don't. And the company was saying, well, we can't just reconstruct the community because not everyone wants that anymore. And like, well, of course, not everyone wants that anymore. It's been 20 years. People have found different paths. Some people have found no paths. Some people have found okay paths. Most people have not found okay paths. But that all of those people have rights and all of those rights have to be recognized. And I think any solution for Israel and Palestine has to recognize the rights of all Palestinians, even if they're in different circumstances and even if they don't all want the same thing. All of them have rights that have been violated over the course of 50 or 75 years. And there has to be some kind of restitution and reparations for all that destruction. When the first time I heard the chant from the river to the sea, shortly after October 7th, I thought, why are people saying that? Let's just talk about ending the genocide. And like, why do we have to be talking about, do the people who are saying it even know what they're saying? Are they saying they want a one-state solution? Are they saying they want a two-state solution? Like, let's just stick to what's more crucial here, Israel out of Gaza, and then we'll talk about long-term solutions. But the more I thought about it over time, the more I felt like, yes, saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, like that really has to be the solution, that the rights of all Palestinians, no matter where they are, have to be prioritized.